This is the 2023 Mahindra Scorpio, and it starts at a very sharp price of only $41,990 drive away. It makes it quite easily the cheapest vehicle in the segment, and it's got me wondering, is this a Ford Everest on a budget? It's got a lot of the same ingredients here. We've got a 2.2 litre turbo diesel engine, we've got a four-wheel drive system with low range and a locking rear differential. There's room for 6 inside there, not 7, but you do have 3 rows of seating. And it's even got a Watts Link rear suspension there on the live axle at the back. That is the same as a Ford Everest as well. So is this an Everest on a budget? Let's go find out. The Mahindra Scorpio is coming to Australia with an introductory special price of $41,990 drive away, and that's until the 30th of June this year. This is for the base Z8 specification, which has things like an 8-inch infotainment display with smartphone mirroring, leatherette seat trimming, room for 6 on board, automatic LED headlights and wipers, 18-inch alloy wheels, a reversing camera and rear parking sensors. Opting for the Z8L spec at $44,990 drive away gets you a 12-speaker Sony sound system, forward camera and forward parking sensors, an electric driver's seat and upgraded driver's multi-function display, as well as wireless charging and wireless smartphone connectivity. However, the Mahindra Scorpio gets nothing in terms of active safety. That means no autonomous braking, no lane departure warning, no forward collision warning, there's no rear cross traffic alert or blind spot monitoring either. Under the bonnet is Mahindra's own 2.2 litre turbo diesel engine, which makes 129 kilowatts and 400 newton meters. That is the lowest of its competitors, and it runs through an Aisin 6-speed automatic gearbox and part-time four-wheel drive system. There's also a low-range transfer case and automatically locking rear differential. The Scorpio measures in at around 4.6 meters long, which makes it the shortest of its competitors. It's on par for width, however, and is one of the tallest in the segment. Here's the interior of the Scorpio, and I've got to be honest, this is not a bad execution overall. I do like the amount of build quality on here, just grabbing and pulling on things. It does all feel quite sturdy. This is the Z8 model, so this is the $42,000 drive away model. You can spend a few grand extra and get some nicer stuff like an upgraded sound system. You get a better digital cluster in front of you there and a few other things like driver's electric adjustment. But the materials feel nice. The seats are pretty good. I don't like the fact that there is actually only one cup holder up front here. I'm pretty sure this is the only cup holder in the whole vehicle, which feels like a little bit of a shortcoming for a family car these days. But you've got a bit of storage here. There is what looks to be a wireless charging pad here in front, but in this model, it isn't. It just happens to look like one for some reason, but the Z8L does get wireless charging there. It also gets wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto through this infotainment display here. We've only got wired in this Z8 specification at the moment, but it does take a little bit of time to boot up, but you plug your phone in, you get it going, and it's decent enough for that sort of thing. But overall, it's not too bad, especially when you consider that price point. Don't forget that this is significantly cheaper than others in the segment. There's a manual handbrake, which you don't see too often these days, and you've also got a glove box here for storage, but be prepared because it's actually not that big. Clearly, these air vents in the second row, I'll get to that second row in a minute, these air vents eat into this center console quite considerably, so that's not really a big space. I've got my phone in here, and you can't really fit much more than that, to be honest with you. It's not very big at all, but that's just the way it goes sometimes. Here's the second row of the Scorpio. I'll just put this armrest down here. You'll see that this is actually a 2-seat second row, not a 3-seat one. Mahindra tells us that they've got supply issues with the 3-seat setup at the moment here, so you are stuck with effectively 6 seats overall. There's 2 in the front, 2 in the middle, and 2 in the back. This is kind of like a captain's chair setup. Also, by the way, if you are enjoying this video, let us know in the comments below. Give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our YouTube channel, please. It's a really great help for us when we're doing these videos. Now, other things, we've got air vents here. We do have a fan speed control, which is handy, and a USB-C power outlet. But like I said before, there isn't any extra cup holders here. I feel like one in the middle here might be nice. You can fit bottles in the door, which is handy. But in terms of space, this is pretty good overall. There's loads of headroom, as you can see. Legroom is pretty good also, and this is kind of a slightly high seating position here. So visibility through the front and out the side, that's all pretty good as well. So as long as you don't want to fit 3 in here, this is a pretty good setup. Here's the boot of the Scorpio. The first thing to talk about is a side hinged tailgate, which is a little bit different, I suppose, to others in the segment. Most of them are hinged at the top here, so you might have issues with the height of the tailgate opening sometimes, but here it's more about the length. I'm thinking about if you're in a tight shopping centre car park or something like that and you're hard up against the wall here, you need to be conscious of that because this does swing out quite a way. But once you get it open, this is the amount of boot space you've got on offer in 4-seat mode. It's a decent sized boot actually, and it works pretty well because this third row here butts up, and that's pretty much a nice square space to load all of your gear into. For reference, I've got a bag here. This is a nice Christmas gift from my wife. Thank you very much, Michelle. That fits in pretty well, but I'm going to show you now. Pop that out, put this third row in. Now, it is a lot smaller. I'll show you with this bag here now. It actually doesn't fit. I'm thinking a couple of very small backpacks. Maybe you can fit that vertically in or something like that, but I'm getting Suzuki Jimny vibes in terms of the size of this boot at the moment. It's not very big at all, but you can fit 6 in here at the moment, and I'll show you now what that third row is like. Here's the third row of the Scorpio, and as you can see, it's fairly tight. My legs are hard up against this seat in front here, and there isn't any sliding ability in that second row, so you can't scooch those forward, unfortunately, to fit in a little bit better. Headroom is a bit tight as well. I'm practically sitting in the boot here, so my head is rubbing up against this part of the roof. If you're a smaller human, you might fit a little bit better, but larger adults probably will start complaining after a short amount of time in the back here. Another thing to consider, there is airbag coverage going into this third row, but it is only partial in terms of curtain airbags. So I'm expecting that they'll come to about here halfway through this glass. It's not full coverage. And to be honest with you, you're probably not going to want to use this third row all of the time because of the airbag coverage, the lack of space, and when you've got it, obviously, the lack of boot space as well. One of the first things you'll notice about this Scorpio-N when you start it up is that it's surprisingly a little bit quiet and refined. If you're used to older four-wheel drives, older turbo diesel four-wheel drives, this is actually fairly muted in terms of the way it starts up. There isn't too much vibration from the engine and that sort of thing. Now once you get moving, you have to, I suppose, temper your expectations in terms of how fast this Mahindra is. It does have the lowest power and torque outputs relative to competitors, and I'm talking about all of those ute-based 7-seat four-wheel drives in the segment. So things like the Toyota Fortuner, Mitsubishi Pajero Sport, Ford Everest, and also the Isuzu MU-X. So don't expect this thing to be a rocket ship because it's not, but at the same time, it feels pretty torquey and flexible enough. You're not going to be setting any land speed records, but it's powerful enough to do the job, I think, and it is a little bit refined. The engine is helped by this 6-speed Aisin automatic gearbox. That's the same gearbox that's used in things like a Toyota Hilux, Isuzu D-Max as well. It's a pretty good gearbox, makes good decisions. It's not too overly reactive, and it allows that torque to do the torquing, I suppose you could say. There isn't as much torque in this engine as others in the segment, but I suppose you just need to be at peace with that. It is good enough for the job, just not the best in segment. There's an electric steering setup in this Mahindra, which is fairly light in terms of feel overall. It's not as light initially as what you'd get in a Isuzu D-Max or MU-X, I think. It does weight up a little bit as you start driving, and as a car for tootling around town, it's fine. It doesn't have the same sort of feedback and feel as you might get in some others. I would say that the Ford Everest is probably the best in the segment in that regard, in terms of balancing ride quality, handling and feel, and just feeling secure and stable on the road. This isn't as good as that, but in saying that, it's also not too bad. You do have to really look at this thing as a value point of view overall. It isn't as good as the others in the segment, but it's also not as expensive, so it is a bit of a bang for buck thing. And in terms of ride quality, generally speaking, it's okay. We've got a Watts-Link rear suspension setup here. That's similar to what you'd get in a Ford Everest and a Ford Ranger Raptor, but the experience driving it is a bit different to that. We've got decent bump absorption when things are a little bit bigger, but it's the smaller imperfect surfaces of driving around country roads and that sort of thing. It can feel slightly fidgety and communicative, I suppose, just telling you what's going on underneath. It doesn't smooth out and absorb things as well as others. I think the Isuzu MU-X is one of the better cars in this regard. Toyota Fortuna is actually not too bad either, I think. This is maybe a step or two behind that. But once you get used to this Mahindra, it isn't too bad. It's definitely not excellent in any regard, I think. But this engine is surprisingly refined, and it's got enough performance there just to not leave you red-faced, I suppose. It absolutely keeps up with traffic. There's no issue with that. You don't have to floor it all of the time, and you can let that torque gently accelerate away. You're definitely not going to win any races, but it's going to do the job pretty well. So we're doing a bit of off-roading in this Scorpio, and we're starting off with some relatively tame stuff here on a, looks to me to be an old disused golf course, but it's worth chatting about the basics of this Scorpio. Like I said earlier, this does have similar fundamentals, mechanically speaking, to an Everest, but not all vehicles are created the same, and I've had a bit of a dig around on this car, had a bit of a look underneath and that sort of thing, and there are a couple of low points to be aware of if you want to take this thing fairly hard off-road. The major one for me is the AdBlue tank. It's a 20-litre tank, and it's situated just behind one of the back wheels there, and it is in the firing line if you start to run out of departure angle. So it's not very well protected, and if you do puncture that tank, you're effectively got a big paperweight of a car, so you definitely need to be aware of that and even consider adding some protection to it. But in terms of the drivetrain, this is classic four-wheel drive stuff. We've got a part-time four-wheel drive system, shift on the fly, so it's four-wheel drive only off-road, and we do have a low-range transfer case. Currently crawling up a hill here in first gear, low range, doing 2000 RPM. It's pretty happy. It's trundling along. The best thing about this car, and I think it'll help with less experienced four-wheel drivers, is that the locking differential is automatic. What it does, at speeds under 30 k's an hour, it effectively senses wheel spin and it locks the diff by itself. So you'll feel it kick in when you run out of grip. You'll feel it thud a little bit in the rear end there, and you'll probably feel a little bit more traction come into play as well. You don't forget to use it, which is nice, and it can get you out of trouble if you find yourself in it, which is a handy thing to have. We've also got a hill descent control here, which is similar to what you'll get in most other four-wheel drive vehicles. You turn it on and you can adjust the speed via the buttons on the steering wheel, which is nice. I had it down to as low as 5 kilometers per hour, which isn't as low as others you can get. I think there are others that can do as low as 2 kilometers an hour, which is better in the more extreme stuff. This 5 kilometers an hour, it's a help, absolutely, but it will feel a little bit too fast when things get properly steep. But we've got a little bit more challenging stuff coming up soon, so we'll get an idea of what the suspension is like and what the stability of this car is like as well. And we'll get an idea, I think, of how it compares to others in the segment, because if you're looking at a car like this, generally speaking, you're going to want some off-road capability, because there are cars like a Kia Sorento or a Toyota Kluger that are better family cars, but they can't go off-road. This is an off-roader. We'll find out how good it is today. Something of a first challenge here for the Scorpio. A little bit of a hill to climb. I'm going to take it at a silly angle and see what the suspension does at a low speed. Feel that diff lock just kick in there, gives you a bit of extra traction. Rolls around. Shortish wheelbase on this car means the turning circle feels pretty good. It's actually a little bit more nimble than others. And now we've got some extra ruts here, so we're going to be giving that suspension a pretty good workout, I think. Just put it in reverse and come back around again. Now, once again, I'm just going to take this really slow and make the car do the work and just see how it feels from here. Up we go. Oh, feel that thud there. That's that rear diff kicking in. Once it's kicked in, it does disengage, so you kind of need to stay on the throttle for that diff to stay locked. So it gives you the traction, but it probably isn't as smooth as other options out there. Touches down once again, pretty easy. It does that quite well, and I'm just in four-wheel drive, high range, no modes, nothing like that. Nice and easy. So from a beginner's point of view, it does kind of make sense. Now I'm just going to try this out again in low range with mud and rut mode activated. Now once again, I'm going to crawl nice and slow here, especially in low range. Gearing feels pretty decent. Not immensely low, but it's low enough, I think, for most four-wheel driving. I can feel the front axle doing a little bit more there just to try and control things a bit. But it does feel pretty good. We're definitely lifting wheels. The car isn't too worried about it. There we go. That is pretty good. This Scorpio isn't as competent or as good as others in the segment in quite a few regards. However, it does come at a much lower price, so it does really balance up, I suppose, in some regards. There are some things you really need to be aware of though, and safety is the big one for me. This is missing the active safety technology that most new cars have in Australia these days. And being a family car, an urban car, most of the time, this thing is sorely missing that stuff. It's going to come in the future, but it's not here now. It's a couple of other little things, I suppose. There's only one cup holder inside. The packaging at the back isn't perfect either. I wish that boot was bigger in 6-seat mode, but I do like the powertrain and I do like the off-road capability that is on offer here, although that AdBlue tank kind of is in the firing line there if you do start doing some pretty hard stuff off-road. But as a change in step for Mahindra, this is a big move forward for the Indian brand, and it shows that they are here to play, and this is a good value car, although you need to be aware of those shortcomings.